today or if we're going to be busy. I'm sure we will be at some point, but I wanted to go over a couple processes and I had some people ask about Forge for Effect and what that means or what it means to me, all that fun stuff. So let me grab a stool real quick. There we go. Got a couple axe heads I've forged out of hammerheads. You guys may have got to watch some of those live videos and maybe even seen some of the axe testing, which I just did a video on these guys right here, which some of them stuck better than others, but um, that's kind of part of different designs. Is frankly, I mean, something like this isn't too bad, but you got a little straighter edge. You don't have as much of a rising tip here, so. The tomahawks seem to throw a little better than the bearded axes. And this one, while it looks cool, there's just a little more curvature to that blade. And it's my opinion is that even though it doesn't throw too well, and this would throw great against end grain, the vertical grain, it's just a little tougher on. You can actually see where it's red on top where I hit the target. Dead center, damn it. So, Forge for Effect, what it is, pros versus cons. What do we have? So Forge for Effect, for the most part, I do a lot of forging, and then I have stock removal afterwards. Now, I have some examples of what I would consider Forge for Effect. So you can see here that there's a rise, a point that rises here. It's actually blunted and kind of looks like the underside of a bearded axe, but it's on the top. And this I generally cut off, and I trim this down to essentially this. Okay. Now you can see that there's excess material here to remove. Man, I'm still thinking I may round that down. Um, but everything that's right here is contained within this mass. And when I say mass, a lot of people are like, I suppose it's a mass, it's unfinished. It is unfinished. It will be finished. In this case, I need to trim this the back portion of the eye up, round it off, and create something along the lines of maybe this tomahawk right here that's got a thinner eye, make it look more like a punched eye, but you can see how this drops. Well, that's kind of what I'm doing when I'm making something like this. This is a little more exaggerated. That little one is a lot less mass, but basically, from what I have here, I can remove the excess material, and I can get a better, maybe not a better product, but I have the extra material to produce that particular item. It's just taking away what doesn't need to be there. And that one reduces weight. Two, it doesn't take me as long to forge, so I can keep prices lower. So let's say that um, instead of 4 years ago when I was selling this for $275, sometimes more, that today you could probably get one of these in the $175, $200 range because one, I've invested in more equipment, and I've also refined techniques so that I can produce something that is more economical. It's going to still be the same quality. These are differentially hardened. They're high carbon steel. Um, but instead of trying to push that down and draw it out in the bottom and take 45 minutes longer to produce this, in that time I can produce oh 45 minutes. I can forge at least another axe head, if not get about halfway into a third. So that is just kind of part of what I do. This is bugging me right here being open, so I'm going to close it real quick. So pros versus cons. Does it affect the quality? I don't believe it does. I don't believe it really that Forge for Effect is going to affect the quality. If you have enough material there to finish that piece out, then I think that you're going to be of equal quality to a piece that's forged to more specifically to shape. Now, can forging to shape be of lesser quality? I suppose if you got that piece too thin, do I have? This is a pretty thin blade. It's still a strong blade, but that's a pretty thin blade right there. Heavy between 1/8 and 3/16 of an inch, but if I wanted to polish this up, how much of this would I have to remove, and how much material would I have versus forging something? Trying to find an example here. Forging something that's heavier in comparison, and then being able to polish it down because I didn't try to spread this out as much as I could. That wasn't the goal. Now, there was a time when blacksmiths and bladesmiths did absolutely, and still do, make the most of what material they have available. And I'll give you an example of that here in just a moment. I've got one of my higher dollar blades over here. I'll show you guys that and give you just a little bit of information on it. But cons of Forge for Effect, a lot of people are going to say, well, you should have done more with that. You could spread that out more. If you're not trying to get more out of it, it doesn't make any sense to continue to overforge a piece when that is not necessary for that particular project. So with that being said, there is there are several schools of thought on the matter, really, and some of that comes from the ones that I love the most, the armchair blacksmiths of social media, who critique and for some reason seem to have the most knowledge about everything, yet take no action to do so. And for those who would say that you're not doing enough, you're not going far enough with that, you could do more. You can do more. I could do more with every piece I make. If you're a maker, you can do more with every piece that you make. And what that comes down to is that there's always room for improvement, but there comes a stopping point before you go too far into a project. Now, if I'm selling a tomahawk for $150, don't expect me to spend 6 hours on it. So our shop fee, I want to say, is around about $165 an hour. So if I can forge out a tomahawk head in 45 minutes, I can grind it, and then I don't take into account the heat treat, the assembly, and so forth, which using the prefab tomahawk handles, that saves a lot of time on assembly. Then I can afford to sell a tomahawk for $125 to $150 on the low end. If I'm going to make a nicer bearded axe and it's going to take more time, it's going to cost more. That's just the nature of business and production in general. And what it comes down to is, if it costs you, if your shop rate is $100, we're just going to go $100 round number. Your shop rate's $100, and you're going to sell a piece for $250, and you spend 4 hours on it, you just cost yourself $150. If I did math correctly, I'm hoping I did. You cost yourself like $150 because you put $400 into that piece and you only got like, $250 out of it. So, um, a lot of people don't take that into consideration. They're like, oh, well, you can't count time. I'll tell you what, I guarantee anyone who works an hourly job counts time. Anyone who manages those persons counts time. So, yes, absolutely, you should count time because your time is valuable. And we only have so much of that. Once you use up so much of that time, you don't have any more. Now, whether that counts in time in a day, time in a shift, or eventually we all do have a shelf life, people. So don't waste it too much. Enjoy it, and that's one thing I like to do. I like to enjoy making things, but that's also how I pay my bills. That's how I buy my properties, my vehicles. Um, that's also how I afford to go teach blacksmithing and bladesmithing. And also, that's how we raise money for people in need. And at some point, we're all in need. And if you're not, you're very fortunate, and consider helping others as well if you aren't already. So I was talking about pros and cons of Forge for Effect. Cons: you're going to do more stock removal. You're going to have to remove material. And if you are using a more expensive material, like let's say you're using a pattern welded steel or materials that are just more expensive, you're going to lose that material from the stock removal. So forging to effect, appropriate planishing to reduce those hammer marks, and also using sharp belts with the proper contact wheels and so forth. That's going to help reduce how much material you're potentially losing, because you can have it clean and still end up with an irregular surface. And a lot of people go into hand sanding on that. I don't do a lot of hand sanding, especially on the lower dollar pieces. On the higher dollar pieces, I sure do. And so let's talk about some of the higher dollar pieces. And some of you may have already noticed everything's backwards. I'm on a selfie cam, so keep that in mind when I'm showing you this book and some stuff like that, that it's going to be backwards. Okay. So this is a complete mess back here. I never can get people to keep that clean. Okay, so we are here at my front desk where we like to look at neat stuff. And hey, you know what, man? I've been looking at that Smoky Mountain Knife Works catalog. Not that one, but the catalog in general since I was in grade school. And we've been at Smoky Mountain Knife Works before, and I'm hoping to be there again soon for Robbie Bowman's grudge match. We were there this past year. We always stop in through that area. So this knife, for one, it won Most Unusual Knife 2022 at the GAKC show. It's published in Knives 2023. Come on page 227, right there, it says Brown-Rhodes. Now this blade was not forged for effect by any means. This cost me about $3,500 to make the blade itself, and that is meteorite Damascus. This was a double canister. I did a canister Damascus, and then I drew that out, cut and restacked, added more 1095 powder because I noticed there were fissures in the meteorite. That's pretty common. So I added more 1095 powder with that, and it helped to fill in those fissures, which are actually evident. If you look down here, you can see the fissures. Did a lot of cleaning on this blade, multiple etches, electrochemical etch for my name there for Brown-Rhodes Forge Works. The handle material is rather unique. It's explained in the book as well. Fittings are 100 plus year old wrought iron. This has a threaded tang, and the handle material is actually human femur. Okay, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, that's illegal." It's really not. No, this was acquired as a retired medical specimen, and there's only a couple states that's restricted in. And usually, what happens is I have people come in, we'll show them that. We usually don't let them touch it because it's a 5-figure knife. Um, and they'll come in, they'll be like, "Where do you get a human femur?" I say, "Right here, I got one." I've had people ask me if I collected this myself, and no, you can actually see where this was pinned. I purchased this legally. This is actually a pretty good size femur. Um, and I will probably go ahead, and I was going to use part of this as a uh, for a build, but as it goes, the economy happened and life happened to the buyer. So I'm going to end up using this for my own build. I paid for it. It happens. But this particular piece, I did a lot more forge to shape. I did a lot more hand finishing to it because I wanted to make sure that I had a piece that was respectable, and I didn't want to lose too much of this material. A friend of mine, I'll let him remain anonymous. If he's watching this, he knows who he is. Some years back, a friend of mine, we were working in my shop. He comes in, he says, "Hey, I got an order for a Damascus blade for $130." I said, "Okay, you have the Damascus?" "Oh no, I got to make it." Okay. So this is kind of a forge for effect thing. He wanted twist Damascus. I think it cost $350 for us to make that billet. Most of it was by hand, and this blade, when it was done, was less than 1/8 inch thick. I said when it was done, not when it was forged. When it was forged, it was over 3/8 of an inch thick. Yeah. He kept grinding, kept grinding. "Oh man, I'm getting warpage." It's a twist blade. It's 1095 and 15 and 20. You've got different hardnesses. We got different alloys. We got different rates of expansion and contraction. You're going to have that. There's certain things you're going to have to do. So finally, when he had it down to slightly under 1/8 of an inch, he was like, "Hey, can you fix this? I think I'm going to lose the blade." Like, "Yeah, you're going to grind it away. It's nothing," which you already had ground the equivalent of 2 blades off of it. So at that point, just the forging of that Damascus cost about $350. He was going, I think he got 130, maybe he has 160. He didn't get anything out of it money wise. So that was one of those situations where you need to take into account, do I do forge for effect or do I do forge to finish? Well, one, not using the right contact wheels and abrasives resulted in probably some excessive loss on the blade itself. The other thing that we look at is by hand would have been any cheaper. Hand sanding, it really wouldn't have. It wouldn't have been any faster. It might have saved some material though. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're forging a blade. If you're doing forge for effect, if you're doing more precise forgings for forging to shape. This was forged pretty close to shape. This is a blade I forged out of 1085 I got from Pops, and it does have a hamon. Now, a lot of people would tell me that you don't etch that hamon, that's cheating, much like forge for effect. Everyone has an opinion. This particular piece, I could have polished down, but I'm not going to polish this to 1200 grit. I'm not going to spend 4 to 6 hours of polishing by hand to find out that maybe there's just an area that's not as clear. I'm not going to do that and find out, and these are all things that could happen, and find out that I'm only going to get $300 for a knife. if you spend that much, between the time you forge, not taking into account cost of materials. um, it can be very it can add up real quick. So uh, pros of Forge for Effect, or at least another pro, would be that it can be more economical as far as saving time. Now, if you don't forge it enough and you have to do a lot of stock removal, you're not going to save as much. Plus, you may have additional abrasives. So it's all about finding that happy medium. I've actually got some leaf springs over here. A friend brought in from his truck. He had them changed out, and he wanted a Bowie knife made because it's his truck. He wants a knife made from that spring. So I said, okay. And of course, I do have to be cautious about possible fractures or anything from its life as a spring and being used as so. But it's a heavy stock. Okay, this is what I'm getting at, is that's a heavy stock. And for a big Bowie, I can do that. I can definitely do that. For a Bowie, for a kukri, for a sword, it'll be okay. On the heavier stuff, might even be able to forge it down, punch an eye, and make an axe. But if you're wanting to make a fillet knife, don't start with a 3/8 inch thick leaf spring. You're going to do a lot of grinding, or you may cause some problems with the integrity of the piece as you're forging it out, trying to get that much out of it. And then again, it may be just fine. But I guess what I'm saying is that using material that is relative, beginning material, parent stock, if you will, relative to the finished piece is critical. What I mean by that is, if you want a blade that's an 1/8 inch thick, don't start with, I mean, you can start with 1/4 inch. But I recommend, if you want something that's going to be on an average of an 1/8 inch thick, once it's ground and finished, to start with 3/16. If it's an 1/8 inch thick, you probably shouldn't be forging it, because it's going to roll on you. There's going to be mushrooming, and then just potential for decarburization. Your performance may not be as good as what it could be. On the thinner stuff, a lot of times I will do stock removal. Um, if you want something to be 3/16 thick, start with a 1/4 inch. So that's what I recommend. I've had some guys who are like, man, I really just like to get a hold of some 3/8 to forge. For what? Well, I want to make a bigger, heavier knife. You'll do that. You'll carry that knife around for quite a while trying to sell it because it's so bulky. That would be my opinion on the matter, and that's from my experience. Now, if you want to produce something heavy, you want to make a heavy carcass splitter or something, absolutely. Trying to make a 4-pound Bowie knife is, reconsider that. Design and marketing. I have some pieces around here that I'm like, man, those Bowies they're heavy, but they're proportionate. I've got hunting knives that have some weight to them because I've done poured pewter on them for the bolster and pommel, and that works. But your market also will determine on form versus function and how that balance rides. Um, because there are some knives that most people are not going to use. For example, the meteorite Damascus recurve I just had out. There's other knives that, for hell, I think we got these on special like $150 right now. This is a forged 1095 high carbon. Take a rust eraser to that. With the purple hard handle, poured pewter bolster and pommel. And I think right now we've got these for like $150. I've only got a couple of them left. And I'll clean this up a little bit later. It's just got a speck on it. So Forge for Effect, con. A con on that would be people don't think you've finished it. I've heard the same thing about Brute de Forge. For those of you who are not familiar with Brute de Forge blade essentially has forge marks left in it, but are intentionally put there to make a piece have texture, to make it look antiqued or rugged, perhaps. And if done properly, makes for a functional blade. If you do forge for effect and you do not profile or uh, grind that profile or thickness appropriately, it's not going to look like it's finished. It's not going to perform the way it should. The axes I was showing earlier, the ones that are getting ready to go up on market, those four, um, they're a little more than Brute de Forge because I have cleaned the scale off and I started cleaning up some of that. These are utilitarian pieces, people. So in this case, I'm not worried about it because they are going to get dirty. They are going to get rusty at some point. There's a lot of potential. What could be? Could it be completely polished? Sure as hell could. Could you even etch that so you can see the temper line? If you really feel like it. But at that price point, it's not feasible. If I were to leave fire scale on those, oil them, and just sharpen and polish the edge, they'd work just fine. Performance isn't going to be any better than what they are now. I just happen to find that shiny stuff happens to catch the eye. Some people have what we refer to as raccoon syndrome, where, ooh, shiny, this caught my eye. Now I have a primary focus on this piece. And that's what I like to do. And I found that shiny pieces have a tendency to stand out more. Now, Damascus, does it stand out more? Yes. Appropriate backgrounds are critical. So and I know I brought Brute de Forge in on to the Forge for Effect matter. But so if you are displaying something that you want people to see, make sure you have an appropriate background. If you have a dark piece and you put it on a dark background, it's not going to pop. If you have an active background, a lot of things can get lost in that background at shows or for photographic purposes. So, I guess what I want to go with on this is that there are pros and cons to Forge for Effect and for different forging techniques. Guys, be sure to like and subscribe. I hope I haven't been too damn boring on this because normally I'm forging and grinding and doing other cool stuff, but just different techniques, different processes. There's more than one way to get from point A to point B, and sometimes we've got to weigh that out to figure out what is best. You guys have a great one. Hope you have a great 2025. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Share this out. We'll catch you a bit later.